Hello and welcome. I am so glad you have chosen to join me today for this special time of reflection. We are about to embark on a shared journey, a gentle walk through the opening chapters of Nehemiah. This is an invitation to step away from the busyness of your day, to find a quiet space and to listen. The words we will explore are ancient, yet remarkably fresh and relevant today. We'll read from a version using simple language, modern language, to make the story accessible and clear. The purpose is not to rush through scripture, but to savor it. We'll explore the first 7 chapters of Nehemiah, a story of incredible faith, courageous action, and the rebuilding, a wall, a community, its spirit. It's a narrative of deep sorrow and determined hope. You'll hear the voice of a man who cared deeply for his people and for God. So much that he left a life of comfort for a task that seemed impossible. My voice will be your guide, calm, soft, gentle, creating a peaceful atmosphere where you can feel at ease. This experience is designed as a companion for you. Perhaps you'll listen while taking a quiet walk through a park. Or maybe you'll find a comfortable chair, close your eyes, and simply be still. There is no right or wrong way to engage. Allow yourself this time. Let go of distractions. Open your heart to the story. Think of it as guided meditation, where scripture leads into a deeper connection with our own faith and with the God who inspired these words. As we begin, feel a sense of peace settling over you. This is a safe space to listen, feel, and reflect. You don't need prior knowledge of the Bible or Nehemiah. The story of one person's faithfulness and God's unwavering support is universal. It speaks to challenges we all face, moments we feel called to a greater purpose, and the strength found when we lean on a power greater than our own. Let us begin this journey together with open minds, receptive spirits. So let us begin. Our time together will be intentionally slow and unhurried. The pace of the reading is designed to be meditative, allowing each word and every verse to be fully heard and absorbed. In a world that often demands speed and efficiency, we are choosing to embrace slowness. This deliberate pace is an act of gentle resistance against the rush, an invitation to breathe deeply and settle your mind. It gives you the space to not just hear the story of Nehemiah, but to walk alongside him in your imagination. You can almost feel the dust of the road, see the troubled faces of the people, sense the weight of the task ahead. As we move through the text, you will notice that each chapter is clearly announced. For instance, before we begin the first chapter, you will simply hear me say, Chapter 1. This serves as a gentle marker on our journey, a signpost letting you know where we are in the narrative. Following the completion of each chapter, there will be a moment of silence. This pause is just as important as the words themselves. It is a sacred space, a quiet interlude for you to reflect on what you have just heard. You can use this time to consider how Nehemiah's prayers, his struggles, his victories might connect with your own life. This journey is meant to be a source of spiritual nourishment and renewal. Whether you are walking physically or sitting in stillness, the aim is the same, to create a rhythm of listening and reflecting. The simple language we will use strips away any complexity, faith, leadership, community. It is a story about seeing a need and responding with courage. It is about the power of prayer to change hearts and circumstances, and it is about the incredible things that can be accomplished when people unite for a common purpose under God's guidance. So, I encourage you now to find your own comfortable rhythm. If you are walking, let your footsteps fall in time with the gentle cadence of the reading. If you are sitting, allow your breath to become slow and steady. Let go of any pressure to analyze or study the text in an academic way. Instead, simply receive it. Let the story wash over you. This is your time to be refreshed, your opportunity to connect with an ancient story of faith in a way that feels personal, peaceful, and profoundly encouraging. The path is set before us, and we will walk it together, one step, one word at a time. Our journey will cover the first 7 chapters of this remarkable book, which form a complete and powerful narrative arc. In these initial chapters, we are introduced to Nehemiah, a man serving in a position of honor in the palace of a powerful king, yet his heart is heavy. We will begin with his profound grief upon hearing the desolate state of Jerusalem, the city of his ancestors. You will hear his heartfelt prayer, confession, sorrow, a bold plea for God's favor. This sets the stage for everything that follows, grounding the entire mission in a deep and personal relationship with God. From this place of prayer, we will follow Nehemiah as he bravely approaches the king to ask for permission to return and rebuild. This part of the story, found in chapter 2, is a masterclass in waiting on God's timing and speaking with wisdom and courage. We will witness the beginning of the mission, the initial survey of the ruined walls under the cover of darkness, the first stirrings of opposition from those who do not wish to see Jerusalem restored. These early chapters highlight the essential first steps of any great undertaking: a burden from God, a season of prayer, and a courageous step of faith into the unknown. As we move into chapter 3, chapter 4, the focus shifts from one man's vision to a community in action. You will hear the names of the families and individuals who came together, each taking responsibility for a section of the wall. It is a powerful picture of unity and shared purpose. Yet, this communal effort is immediately met with threats and ridicule. We will explore how Nehemiah led the people to respond not with fear, but with a practical combination of prayer and vigilance, working with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. This section is a testament to the resilience required to see God's work through to completion. Finally, our reading will guide you through chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7. Here the challenges become more complex, moving from external threats to internal problems of social injustice, and then to personal attacks against Nehemiah's character. We will see his wisdom as a leader as he confronts injustice, and his unwavering focus as he resists distraction and deceit. The journey culminates in the completion of the wall, a moment of incredible triumph, and the careful registration of the people who have returned. This first half of the book concludes not just with a finished construction project, but with a community poised for spiritual renewal, ready for the next chapter of their story with God. Table of Contents, Part 2, Act 1, Nehemiah 1-2, about 9 sections. 1. A distant sorrow, the news from Judah. 2. The cupbearer's heartbreak, a personal grief. 3. A prayer of remembrance recalling God's promises. 4. A plea for mercy, the heart of confession. 5. The anxious wait, a season of prayerful patience. 6. The king's question, a moment of divine opportunity. 7. A bold request, stepping out in faith. 8. The journey begins, from Susa to Jerusalem. 9. A secret survey assessing the ruins by night. The story begins not with the clatter of construction or the pronouncements of a king, but in a quiet, personal moment of connection. Nehemiah, a man of significance and trust in the Persian court, receives visitors. These are not just any travelers. They are his own people, men from Judah, including his brother Hanani. They have made the long and arduous journey from the homeland, and Nehemiah, living in the citadel of Susa, is eager for news. His first question reveals where his heart lies, despite his comfortable surroundings. He asks about the Jewish people who had survived the exile, and about the state of Jerusalem, the city that was the heart of their history and faith. The reply he receives is not one of joy, or even of quiet perseverance. It is a report of profound distress and shame. The men tell him that the survivors in the province of Judah are in great trouble. They live under a cloud of disgrace. This is not just a political or economic hardship. It is a deep spiritual wound. The physical state of Jerusalem is a mirror to the condition of its people. The Great Wall, which once provided protection and defined the city as a sacred and secure space, remains broken down. Its gates, once bustling with life and commerce, stand as charred ruins destroyed by fire. The news paints a picture of utter desolation and vulnerability. This report lands on Nehemiah with devastating force. He is hundreds of miles away, serving a foreign king, yet the sorrow of his people becomes his own. The image of the ruined walls and burnt gates is more than just a description of architectural decay. It is a symbol of a broken covenant, a scattered people, and a heritage in peril. The disgrace they feel is a collective shame, a sense that God's chosen city lies in ruins, a pathetic monument to past glory. For a man like Nehemiah, whose identity is so deeply intertwined with his faith and his people's history, this news is nothing short of a catastrophe that demands a response. The initial scene sets the tone for the entire book. It establishes the central problem not as a simple construction project, but as a spiritual crisis. The brokenness is external, visible in the rubble and ash, but its roots are internal, felt in the hearts of the people and in the soul of Nehemiah himself. The news from Judah travels across the miles and plants a seed of divine discontent in his heart. It is a holy sorrow, a grief that will not be comforted by his personal success or security in the palace. This sorrow becomes the catalyst, the very first step on a journey of restoration that will be led by God. And so the story begins. Upon hearing the devastating news from his brother, Nehemiah's reaction is immediate and deeply emotional. He does not simply process the information or begin to formulate a strategic plan. Instead, the weight of the report crushes him. He sits down and weeps. This is not a fleeting moment of sadness, but a profound and prolonged period of mourning. For several days, he is overcome with grief. He fasts, denying himself food. He prays, turning his anguish towards the only one who can truly understand and help, the God of heaven. His high position as cupbearer to the king offered him every worldly comfort, yet all of it meant nothing in the face of his people's suffering. This display of raw emotion is incredibly telling. Nehemiah is not a distant, detached leader. He is a man whose heart is completely tethered to the well-being of his kinsfolk and the honor of his God. His weeping is a testament to his empathy. He feels the disgrace of the people in Jerusalem as if it were his own. The ruins of the city are not just a historical tragedy to him. They are a present and painful reality that pierces his soul. His fasting is an outward sign of his inner turmoil, a physical expression of a sorrow so deep that the normal routines of life, like eating, become secondary. It is an act of humbling himself before God, showing his complete dependence. The fact that this intense mourning lasts for days indicates the depth of his burden. It was not a passing sentiment, but a life-altering realization. He carried this sorrow with him as he went about his duties in the palace, a secret agony hidden behind the polished facade of courtly life. To be the king's cupbearer was a role of immense trust and privilege. He was responsible for the king's safety, tasting the wine to ensure it was not poisoned. He was a constant presence in the royal court, a man of influence and access. Yet his spirit was far away, amidst the rubble and shame of a city he may never have even seen himself. This personal heartbreak is the engine of the entire story. Before any walls are rebuilt, a heart must first be broken. Before any action is taken, a season of prayer and mourning is required. Nehemiah's grief is what qualifies him for the task ahead. It is not his skill, his position, or his intelligence that makes him the right person for the job, but his capacity to care so deeply. God does not call the equipped. He often equips the called. The calling often begins with a burden, a holy ache for things to be made right. Nehemiah's tears water the soil from which the seeds of renewal will sprout. After the initial outpouring of grief, Nehemiah's sorrow channels itself into one of the most beautiful and powerful prayers recorded in the Bible. He does not begin by listing his requests or complaining about the situation. Instead, he starts with worship. He addresses the Lord, the God of heaven, acknowledging his supreme authority and power. He describes God as the great and awesome God. Before he speaks of the broken walls of Jerusalem, he first builds a foundation of reverence for the one who is greater than any earthly problem. It is a reminder that no matter how desperate the circumstances, God remains enthroned and in control. He continues his adoration by recalling God's character. He is the God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments. This is a crucial part of his prayer. Nehemiah is not appealing to a distant, capricious deity. He is appealing to a faithful God, a God who has made promises and has a history of keeping them. By referencing the covenant, Nehemiah is reminding both himself and God of the special relationship that exists between the Lord and his people. He is anchoring his plea not in his own merit, but in the steadfast, loyal love of God. It is an act of faith, calling upon God's own declared nature as the basis for his hope. Nehemiah then asks God to be attentive to his prayer. He pleads, "Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying." It is a humble and earnest request for a divine audience. He positions himself as a servant, praying day and night, for the servants, the people of Israel. This language is significant. He identifies himself completely with his people. He does not stand apart from them as someone more righteous or important. He is one of them, sharing in their identity and their plight. His prayer is not just for himself, but for the entire community. A continuous, unrelenting intercession born from his persistent grief and love. This section of the prayer demonstrates a profound understanding of how to approach God. It is not about demanding action, but about aligning one's heart with God's character and promises. By starting with worship and remembrance, Nehemiah places the problem in its proper context. The greatness of God dwarfs the ruins of Jerusalem. The faithfulness of God provides hope even when the people have been unfaithful. He is building his case, not on the urgency of the need alone, but on the very nature of the God he serves. He is appealing to God's honor and his long-standing commitment to his people, a strategy rooted in deep theological understanding and personal faith. Having established God's greatness and faithfulness, Nehemiah's prayer takes a crucial turn towards confession. He does not blame the Babylonians, nor point fingers at the generations before him. Instead, he includes himself in a sweeping admission of guilt. "I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you." This is a powerful moment of corporate and personal responsibility. Though he has lived a life of apparent integrity in the Persian court, he understands the nation's downfall was collective disobedience, and he does not exempt himself from that shared identity and failure. He stands in solidarity with his people, sharing their sin and their sorrow. He becomes specific in his confession, "We have acted very wickedly towards you." He admits that the people of Israel have failed to obey the commands, decrees, and laws that God had given them through Moses. This is not a vague apology. It is a clear-eyed recognition of the root cause of their exile and current predicament. The destruction of Jerusalem and the scattering of its people were not random acts of history. They were direct consequences of turning away from God's instructions. Nehemiah understands that for restoration to happen, there must first be a sincere and honest reckoning with the past and the sin that led to the brokenness. This act of confession is incredibly humbling. Nehemiah is a man of high standing, yet he prostrates his heart before God, taking on the shame of his nation. He is not saying, look how terrible they have been, but rather, look how terrible we have been. This shift from they to we is the mark of a true intercessor. He bridges the gap between a holy God and a sinful people by standing in the middle, identifying with both. His confession clears the way for him to appeal for mercy, not on the basis of their innocence, but on the basis of God's grace in the face of their acknowledged guilt. By confessing so thoroughly, Nehemiah is doing more than just saying sorry. He is agreeing with God about the state of his people. He is acknowledging the justice of their punishment while preparing to plead for the mercy that flows from God's covenant love. This part of his prayer is essential because it demonstrates a heart that is truly repentant and ready to be used by God. Before he can ask God to rebuild the walls of the city, he must first acknowledge the spiritual ruin within the hearts of the people, including his own. True restoration must always begin with repentance. Section 5. The anxious wait a season of prayerful patience. After his heartfelt prayer of confession, Nehemiah moves to the final part of his plea, rooted in God's own words. He says, "Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses." He quotes God's promise, "If the people are unfaithful, they will be scattered among the nations. But if they return to God and obey his commands, he will gather them back, even from the farthest horizons, to the place he has chosen for his name." This is the turning point of the prayer. Nehemiah respectfully holds God to his promise. He is saying, "We have sinned, as you said we would. Now we are returning to you. Please do what you promised." This is not an act of arrogance, but of profound faith. Nehemiah's confidence is not in his own ability to persuade God, but in the integrity of God's character and word. He has confessed the people's sin, which fulfilled the first part of the prophecy. Now, through his repentant heart and prayer, he initiates returning to God, which is the condition for the second part of the promise: restoration. He reminds God that the people of Israel, scattered and disgraced as they are still your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. He is appealing to God's past actions and his investment in his people as a reason to act again. The prayer concludes with a very specific, immediate request. "O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man." The prayer that began with the vastness of heaven now focuses on a single moment and a single individual, the king. Nehemiah carried this burden for days, perhaps weeks. He knows that any plan to help Jerusalem will require the permission and resources of King Artaxerxes. He is asking God to go before him and prepare the king's heart. The final sentence of the chapter, "I was cupbearer to the king," serves as a powerful conclusion and a bridge to the next part of the story. "I was cupbearer to the king." It explains the context of his prayer and sets up the dramatic encounter to come. For 4 months, from the month of Kislev to the month of Nisan, Nehemiah prayed and waited. He carried this heavy secret, performing his daily duties while his heart was breaking for Jerusalem. This period of waiting was not passive. It was an active, anxious, and prayerful patience, a time of spiritual preparation for the moment when God would finally open the door for him to act. 4 long months pass. Nehemiah continues to serve King Artaxerxes, his heart heavy with the secret burden for Jerusalem. The narrative picks up in the month of Nisan. Nehemiah is performing his duty, taking wine and presenting it to the king. Up to this point, he has managed to conceal his inner turmoil. In the Persian court, appearing sad in the king's presence was not just a breach of etiquette. It could be interpreted as a sign of displeasure or even a threat. It could cost you dearly. Servants were expected to reflect the glory and contentment of the court, not bring their personal troubles before the monarch. On this day, however, Nehemiah's grief is too profound to hide completely. The king, an astute ruler of a vast empire, notices. He looks at Nehemiah and asks a simple but penetrating question. Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. The moment Nehemiah has been praying for has arrived, but it comes in a terrifying package. The king has noticed his sorrow, and Nehemiah is, as he admits, very much afraid. His life could be at risk. A displeased monarch had absolute power. All his prayers, his hopes, and his plans for Jerusalem could be extinguished in an instant if the king interpreted his sadness the wrong way. The divine opportunity is cloaked in immense personal danger. In this heart-pounding moment, Nehemiah's response is a model of wisdom, respect, and courage. He does not immediately blurt out his request. First, he offers the customary, respectful greeting, "May the king live forever." This affirms his loyalty and reassures the king that his sadness is not a sign of any ill will towards him. This brief but crucial sentence creates a space for him to explain the true source of his sorrow. He builds a bridge of respect before he presents his problem, showing that he understands his place and honors the man he serves. It is a masterful display of courtly diplomacy, prompted by a desperate and prayerful heart. Then he answers the king's question directly and poignantly. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins? And its gates have been destroyed by fire? He frames the issue not as a political or military matter, but as a deeply personal one of ancestral honor. Most cultures, including the Persians, held a deep respect for a person's duty to their ancestors and their burial places. By appealing to this universal human value, Nehemiah presents his grief in a way the king can understand and sympathize with. He has turned a moment of great fear into an opportunity to touch the king's heart. The king's response shows that Nehemiah's wise answer has hit its mark. Instead of being angry, the king is moved to empathy and asks another simple, direct question. What is it you want? This is the moment. The door Nehemiah has prayed toward for 4 months swings wide open. Mourning, fasting, intercession. All have led to this single, pivotal question. The fate of Jerusalem and the future of his people hang on his next words. The pressure is immense. The opportunity is divine. He has the king's full attention and an invitation to state his desire. Nehemiah's immediate reaction is telling. Before he speaks to the king, he speaks to God. Then I prayed to the God of heaven. Not a long formal prayer, a silent, instantaneous arrow prayer. A desperate, in-the-moment plea for wisdom, courage, favor, an act of complete dependence on God at the most critical juncture. Even with the king's permission, Nehemiah knew the outcome rested not in his eloquence, but in God's power to move the king's heart. This quick prayer models a constant conversation with God when stakes are highest. Fortified, Nehemiah makes his bold request. If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. He asks for an official commission, to be sent with royal authority to undertake the project. It is audacious, to leave the king's prestigious cupbearer post to work on a ruined city in a minor province. He asks the king to invest in restoring a city with a history of rebellion. He presents the request with humility and respect. He is not demanding. He is appealing. The king, with the queen beside him, engages practical details. How long will your journey take? When will you get back? The questions show the king is seriously considering the request. Nehemiah, having thought and prayed through his plan, gives a specific time frame. The king agrees. The mission is approved. Nehemiah's faithful waiting and bold prayer-fueled request have been honored. Section 8. The journey begins from Susa to Jerusalem. With the king's permission secured, Nehemiah's boldness grows, still guided by his faith that God is directing the conversation. He knows that royal approval is only the first step. He will need practical resources and official authority to succeed. He presses his advantage, requesting letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, the region he must travel through to reach Judah. The letters would act as official travel documents, instructing governors to grant safe passage, a crucial logistical step, so he would not be stopped on the long journey. His foresight is remarkable. 4 months of waiting, more than prayer. He has been planning. He makes a second specific request, a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's royal forest, to authorize timber for the project. Timber for the beams of the gates of the citadel by the temple. Timber for the main city wall. Timber for the house he will live in while overseeing the work. This detail shows he is not an emotional idealist, but a serious, capable project manager. Nehemiah's conclusion: "And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests." He takes no credit. He attributes success to God's favor. He sees God's hand at work in the king's softened heart, in the king's probing questions, and in his generous provisions. This is a cornerstone of Nehemiah's faith. He acts with wisdom and courage, yet trusts the ultimate outcome to God. His role, faithful servant. God's role, provide grace and success. The king grants escort of army officers and cavalry, adding protection and official authority. The journey from palace comfort in Susa to the ruins of Jerusalem begins. Nehemiah, once cupbearer, now governor, commissioned by a foreign king but sent by the King of Heaven. He carries letters, a military guard, and the weight of his people's hope and conviction. The season of prayer and petition is complete. Section 9. A secret survey. Assessing the ruins by night. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, Nehemiah does not immediately announce his intentions or present his royal credentials to the public. Instead, he waits for 3 days. This pause is significant. It likely gave him time to rest after the long journey, but more importantly, it allowed him to observe and assess the situation quietly without drawing attention to himself. He needed to understand the political climate, the morale of the people, the true extent of the damage before he revealed his grand mission. This quiet observation demonstrates his wisdom and patience. He does not rush into action, but proceeds with caution and careful planning. His first major action in Jerusalem is undertaken in secret under the cover of darkness. He tells no one what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. Taking only a few trusted men with him, with himself as the only one on a mount, he slips out through the valley gate. This nighttime inspection is a clandestine operation. He needs to see the state of the walls for himself, without the interference or scrutiny of others. He needs an unvarnished, first-hand account of the task that lies ahead. The darkness provides cover, allowing him to survey the full scope of the devastation without causing alarm or alerting his opponents. The journey is a tour of ruin and decay. He rides towards the Jackal Well, then the Dung Gate, observing the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates destroyed by fire. The path is choked with rubble, no room for his mount to pass, forcing him to dismount and proceed on foot up the Kidron Valley. This physical encounter with the rubble makes the report he heard in Susa a tangible, overwhelming reality. He can now see with his own eyes the scale of the disgrace and the immensity of the work required. This secret survey is not just practical. It is a profound, solemn confirmation of his calling. After the inspection, he returns through the same gate, his mission still a secret. The officials and the people did not know where he had gone or what he was doing. This secrecy was a brilliant strategy. It allowed him to formulate his plan based on facts, not hearsay, and to choose the perfect moment to reveal his vision to the people. By the time he is ready to speak, he will not just be sharing a dream. He will be presenting a challenge based on a sober and thorough assessment of the reality they all faced. The quiet, dark survey of the ruins was the final step in his preparation.
setting the stage for his public call to action.
Section 1. A Symphony of Service. The priests begin the work. Chapter 3 opens not with a grand speech or a royal decree, but with the simple, powerful image of people getting to work. The first to rise to the challenge are the spiritual leaders of the community. Eliashib the high priest and his fellow priests take the lead, setting a powerful example for everyone else to follow. They begin their work on the sheep gate, the gate where lambs for sacrifice were brought. Their first act of rebuilding is symbolic. It links physical restoration with spiritual worship. They do not just build the gate, they dedicate it, setting it apart as holy. They continue along the wall as far as the Tower of the 100, the Tower of Hananel. They roll up their sleeves and join the labour, breaking down any ward between clergy and laity. Their involvement sanctifies the project, mixing mortar, lifting stones. By starting at the sheep gate, they make a profound statement. The path to God and community security are linked. They set the gate's doors in place, committed to finishing the work. The dedication is a moment of prayer and consecration, placing everything under God's blessing. They are not just building a wall, they are restoring a sacred space, re-establishing a boundary with the outside world, creating a safe place for God's people to live and worship. Their example creates immediate momentum, drawing the whole community into the task. Leadership here is action, not title, initiative, and participation. Their work was the first note in a great symphony of service, a call to action around Jerusalem. Section 2. A tapestry of workers, from goldsmiths to daughters. As the chapter unfolds, it reads like a magnificent roll call of commitment, a detailed account of a community mobilized for a common cause. After the priests, the men of Jericho are listed as building the next section. Jericho was a separate town, yet its people came to help rebuild Jerusalem. Their involvement shows the restoration vision extended beyond the city's inhabitants, uniting the broader community of returned exiles. Following them is Zaccur, son of Imri. The text meticulously names individuals and groups, honoring their contribution, painting a vivid picture of a society where everyone has a place and role. What is remarkable is the diversity of the people involved. The list includes individuals from all walks of life, breaking down societal and professional barriers. Uziel of the Goldsmiths Guild repaired a section. Hananiah, a perfume maker, did his part. Skilled artisans used to fine work willingly undertook rough physical wall building. Their participation shows the call to rebuild transcended professions. They laid down delicate tools to pick up stones and mortar, recognizing community security was needed for their trades to flourish. The chapter also highlights the inclusion of women in the work. Next to a section repaired by rulers of Mizpah, the text notes Shalom, a ruler of another district, repaired a section with the help of his daughters. In a patriarchal society, this mention is extraordinary. It shows urgency and unity broke through social norms. These women were active participants, working alongside their father to restore defences. Their contribution is recorded with the same honour as priests and rulers. This tapestry of workers, priests, men from other towns, goldsmiths, perfume makers, rulers, daughters, creates a powerful image of a community completely united. Each person and family took responsibility for the wall section nearest their home or area of influence. The list testifies to Nehemiah's organizational skill and to the spirit-filled response of the people. They saw the need, they caught the vision, and they gave what they had: their time, their strength, their skills, to see the work accomplished, section by painstaking section. Section 3. Unity in action, each family to their section. The organizational genius of Nehemiah's plan becomes increasingly clear as the list of workers continues. The work was divided into manageable sections, and specific families or groups were assigned to each one. This strategy was brilliant for several reasons. Firstly, it broke down a seemingly impossible task, rebuilding the entire circuit of a massive city wall, into smaller, achievable goals. No single group was overwhelmed by the scale of the project. Each had a clear, defined objective: to repair the portion of the wall assigned to them. This fostered a sense of ownership and accomplishment as each section was completed, building momentum and morale for the entire project. Secondly, many people were assigned to work on the section of the wall directly in front of their own houses. For example, Jediah, son of Harumaph, made repairs opposite his house. Benjamin made repairs in front of his house. Hashub made repairs in front of his house. This was a profoundly motivating arrangement. The people were not just building a public wall, they were building the very defense that would protect their own families, their own children, their own homes. The threat of attack was not an abstract concept. It was a real and present danger that they could see from their own windows. This personal stake in the outcome of the work undoubtedly spurred them on with greater diligence and urgency. However, not everyone shared this spirit of commitment. The chapter includes a brief but telling note about the nobles of Tekoa. While the other Tekoites worked diligently on their assigned section, their nobles would not stoop to serve their lord. This small detail serves as a stark contrast to the overwhelming unity displayed by everyone else. It is a realistic acknowledgement that even in the midst of a great move of God, there will be those who, because of pride, apathy, or a sense of self-importance, refuse to participate. Their refusal to stoop or submit their necks to the work highlights the humility of the goldsmiths, perfume makers, and rulers who did choose to serve. Despite this isolated case of non-cooperation, the overwhelming picture is one of extraordinary unity and shared purpose. From the fish gate to the old gate, from the broad wall to the dung gate, the people worked together. They were a living chain of builders, connected by the common goal of restoring safety and honor to their city. The detailed list in Chapter 3 is more than just a historical record. It is a monument in words to the power of a community united in a God-given mission. It proves that when people come together, each taking responsibility for their small part, incredible things can be accomplished for the glory of God. Section 4. The sound of mockery, the enemy's plot and attack. Just as the work is gathering momentum and the people are united in their purpose, the narrative shifts to the emergence of opposition. The progress on the wall does not go unnoticed. Sanballat the Horonite, governor of Samaria and persistent antagonist, hears the Jews are rebuilding the wall. His reaction is one of intense anger and ridicule. He is infuriated. The restoration of Jerusalem threatens his regional power and influence. A fortified, independent Judah would challenge the political landscape, so he resorts to mockery to demoralize the builders. Standing before his associates and the army of Samaria, Sanballat unleashes scornful questions. What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Every question is laced with contempt, sowing doubt and futility. He mocks their weakness. He questions their spiritual authority. He ridicules the speed of their work. He scoffs at the materials they are using. It is a calculated psychological attack to make the builders feel foolish and their task impossible. Tobiah the Ammonite joins the chorus, another official threatened by Jerusalem's renewal. Standing beside Sanballat, he adds a venomous insult. What they are building, if even a fox climbed up on it, he would break down their wall of stones. That vivid image is repeated and spread as propaganda to make the Jews a laughing stock. The insult implies their work is shoddy and their materials weak. Even a small animal could bring it down. It assaults their craftsmanship and resolve. This campaign of mockery and ridicule is the enemy's first line of attack. Before physical violence, they fight in the minds of the workers. They want the people to believe their efforts are pathetic, pointless, doomed to fail. This is a common tactic against God's work in any generation. Opposition often begins with words: doubt, scorn, discouragement. These words aim to extinguish the flame of faith and passion before it can become an unstoppable fire. Sanballat and Tobiah understood. Break the people's spirit and the walls would never be finished. Section 5. A prayer against contempt. Turning to God for justice. Faced with this barrage of public ridicule and contempt, Nehemiah's response is immediate and instructive. He does not engage in a war of words with Sanballat. He does not engage in a war of words with Tobiah. He does not shout back insults or try to defend the quality of their work to their enemies. Instead, he turns directly to God. His first action is to pray, bringing the insults and the pain they cause before the Lord. He begins, "Hear us, our God, for we are despised." This simple opening is a raw and honest admission of the hurt they feel. He doesn't pretend the words don't sting. He acknowledges the weight of the contempt and lays it at God's feet, seeking divine comfort and intervention. The prayer that follows is fierce and unflinching. Nehemiah asks God to turn their insults back on their own heads. He asks that they be given over as plunder in a land of captivity. This may sound harsh to modern ears, but it is a prayer rooted in a deep understanding of justice and God's honor. Nehemiah sees the mockery not just as a personal attack, but as an affront to God himself. The enemies are scorning the work that God has initiated. Therefore, Nehemiah is asking God to vindicate his own name and defend his own project. He is entrusting the justice of the situation entirely into God's hands, rather than seeking personal revenge. He continues his plea with a raw intensity, asking God, "Do not cover up their guilt. Do not blot out their sins from your sight." Why? For they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Nehemiah's protective, pastoral heart is on full display here. He is incensed not just because he has been insulted, but because the spirit of the willing, hard-working people has been attacked. He is asking God to be the defender of the builders, to take their side against those who are trying to demoralize them. This prayer effectively transfers the burden of the conflict from the shoulders of the workers to the shoulders of their all-powerful God. This act of praying is a crucial strategic move. It prevents Nehemiah and the people from being distracted from their primary task. By refusing to engage with the mockery and instead handing the matter over to God, they are free to continue their work on the wall. The prayer becomes their spiritual defense, allowing them to keep their focus, their energy, and their hands dedicated to the physical task before them. Nehemiah teaches a vital lesson. When faced with opposition, the first response should not be retaliation, but prayer. Trust God to handle the mockers while you keep your hands on the work He has given you to do. Well, you know. Section 6. The wall rises, halfway to completion. Despite the enemy's psychological warfare, the people do not stop. Nehemiah turns to God in prayer, keeping the workforce focused. So we rebuilt the wall. The work continued despite mockery and insults. They refused to let negativity halt their momentum. Not arguing, but building, results were tangible and swift. Progress is remarkable. The wall reached half its height. A significant milestone, halfway point. Gaps closed around the city. A continuous defense forms. Visible progress silences scorn. The city begins to look whole again, for the people worked with all their hearts, minds, wills. Unity and determination grew stronger. Wholeheartedness drove rapid progress. A spiritual condition became physical progress. Critical turning point. Resilience proven. Mockery overcome through prayer and labor. Halfway point equals a psychological victory. Success proves the task possible and warns the enemies. Success provokes threats of violence. Section 7. A conspiracy of violence. The enemies plot an attack. The news that the walls of Jerusalem are being repaired and the gaps are being closed infuriates the opposition even further. Success breeds more intense hostility. Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, the people of Ashdod. Together, they form a coalition surrounding Judah on every side. Their anger is no longer just simmering, it is boiling over. They see the rising walls as a direct threat to their security and influence. A fortified Jerusalem signifies a resurgent Judah, and they are determined to stop it at all costs. Their shared animosity unites them in a sinister purpose. Their response escalates from words to action. The text says they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. This is no longer mere insults. It is a conspiracy for a full-scale military assault. They plan to use violence and chaos to halt the work. Their strategy? Create such fear and confusion that the builders abandon their tools and flee. The threat becomes physical, potentially lethal. The lives of Nehemiah and every man, woman, and child working on the wall are in imminent danger. The conspiracy creates a twofold crisis. First, the external threat, a surprise attack. The builders are vulnerable, spread out along the length of the wall, focused on construction. They are not an army. A coordinated assault from multiple directions could be devastating. Second, the internal threat, fear. News of the plot reaches the workers. Jews living near enemy territories hear whispers and warn the builders. They will be coming up against us from every direction. These warnings begin to wear down morale. The people's resolve begins to waver. The men of Judah start to complain. The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. The enemy's strategy is starting to work. Fear and exhaustion are beginning to do what mockery could not, bringing the people to the brink of giving up. Section 8. A sword and a trowel. The strategy of watchful work. Faced with this dual crisis of external threat and internal despair, Nehemiah once again demonstrates his exceptional leadership. His response is both spiritual and profoundly practical. First, as always, he turns to God. But we prayed to our God. Prayer remains his foundational strategy. He places the safety of the people and the future of the project into God's hands. However, he does not stop there, and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Nehemiah understands that faith in God is not passive. It must be accompanied by wise and diligent action. Prayer and practicality go hand in hand. He devises a brilliant strategy to restore the people's morale. He stations people at the lowest, most exposed parts of the wall, behind the gaps that have not yet been filled. He organizes them by families to protect their own loved ones. And he arms them. He gives them swords, spears, and bows. This transforms the workforce into a citizen militia. The sight of armed defenders standing guard would have been a powerful visual message to the discouraged workers and to any enemy spies watching from a distance. It showed they were prepared and would not be an easy target. Next, Nehemiah addresses the people's fear directly with a powerful speech. After inspecting the armed guards, he gathers the nobles, officials, and the rest of the people and says, "Don't be afraid of them." He acknowledges their fear, but commands them not to be ruled by it. He then gives them the reason for their courage. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. He redirects their focus from the size of their enemies to the greatness of their God. He reminds them of the same great and awesome God he first prayed to in chapter 1. This is the source of their true security. He then connects this divine confidence to their earthly responsibilities. And fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. This combination of prayer, practical defense and powerful encouragement is a resounding success. The enemy hears that their plot has been discovered and that the Jews are prepared to fight back. They realize they have lost the element of surprise. God had frustrated their plan. They call off the attack. With the immediate threat neutralized, everyone returns to their work on the wall. However, things are different now. From that day on, half of Nehemiah's men work, while the other half stand guard, fully armed. The builders themselves learn to work with one hand while holding a weapon in the other. They have become worker warriors, embodying the principle of watchful work. Section 9. A call to remember, the Lord will fight for us. The new system of working and watching required careful coordination. Nehemiah, ever the master organizer, implemented a communication system to ensure the entire city could respond at a moment's notice. He recognized that the workers were spread out along the wall, making them vulnerable to a concentrated attack on any single point. To solve this, he instructed a man to stay by his side with a trumpet. The plan was simple but effective. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. This rally point would allow them to quickly consolidate their forces to repel an attack wherever it might occur. This practical instruction was immediately followed by a powerful theological promise, the ultimate source of their confidence. After telling them where to rally, Nehemiah declares, "Our God will fight for us." This was the heart of his leadership and the core of the people's hope. He assured them that while they must hold their swords and listen for the trumpet, the ultimate victory did not depend on their military skill or strategic cleverness. It depended on God. Their fighting was an act of faith, a participation in a battle that ultimately belonged to the Lord. This promise transformed their fear into faith and their anxiety into courageous resolve. So, the work continued under these new vigilant conditions. Nehemiah, his men, the servants, the guards, none of them took off their clothes, even at night. They remained in a constant state of readiness. Each man kept his weapon with him at all times, even when going for water. This paints a picture of incredible discipline and commitment. The project had entered a new phase, one defined by relentless work and unwavering watchfulness. They labored from the first light of dawn, their trowels building up the wall, their swords ready to defend until the stars came out at night. It was a life of exhausting, high-stakes tension. The image of the builder with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other has become an enduring symbol of the Christian life. It represents the reality that serving God often involves building and battling. We are called to constructive work, to build families, to build churches, to build communities, and to spread the good news. At the same time, we must be spiritually vigilant, aware of the opposition that will inevitably arise, and ready to defend the work against attack. Nehemiah's leadership in chapter 4 teaches us to pray as if everything depends on God and to work as if everything depends on us, remembering always that the one who is great and awesome is the one who ultimately fights for us. Section 1. A cry from within, the people's grievance. Just as the builders of the wall had found a rhythm of working and watching, a new crisis emerged, one that was arguably more dangerous than the threat of external attack. This time, the threat came not from Sanballat or the surrounding enemies, but from within the community itself. A great cry of outrage arose from the common people and their wives against their fellow Jews. The unity that had been so powerful in chapters 3 and 4 was beginning to fracture under the weight of severe economic hardship. The problem was not a shared struggle against a common foe, but the exploitation of the poor by the rich within their own ranks, a deep and painful betrayal. The complaints were varied but stemmed from the same root of poverty and desperation. Some cried out that they had large families and needed to mortgage their fields, vineyards, and homes just to get enough grain to eat and survive. They were sacrificing their future inheritance simply to feed their children day by day. Others explained that they had been forced to borrow money to pay the king's tax on their lands, a burden they could not escape. The pressure of rebuilding the wall, which took them away from their normal income-generating work, combined with a probable famine and the ever-present royal taxes, had pushed them to the financial brink, and they were falling over the edge. The most heart-wrenching complaint came from those who had already lost everything. They lamented that although they were of the same flesh and blood as their wealthier countrymen, and their children were no different from theirs, they were being forced to sell their own sons and daughters into slavery. They had mortgaged their fields and vineyards to their richer brethren, and now, with no way to repay the loans, they were losing their children as well. Some of their daughters had already been taken, and they were powerless to do anything about it because their lands, the source of any potential income, now belonged to their creditors. It was a cry of utter despair from people who had lost their property, their freedom, and their children to their own kinsfolk. This internal crisis was a profound spiritual and social sickness. The very law of Moses, which Nehemiah had called upon in his prayer, strictly forbade charging interest to a fellow Israelite and commanded that compassion be shown to the poor. The wealthy lenders were not only ignoring this divine command, but they were also profiting from the misery of the very people who were working alongside them to rebuild the city's walls. The unity of purpose was a facade hiding a deep, corrosive injustice. While they stood shoulder to shoulder against Sanballat, they were simultaneously preying on one another, and this cry of the poor threatened to shatter their community far more effectively than any external enemy could. Section 2. Nehemiah's anger, a leader's holy outrage. When Nehemiah heard their outcry and the specific details of their complaints, his reaction was not one of detached administrative concern. The text says, "I was very angry." This was not the frustration of a project manager seeing his timeline disrupted. It was a deep, holy anger, a righteous indignation that burned within him. He was furious that the sacred work of rebuilding God's city was being tainted by such gross injustice. The exploitation of the poor by the rich was a direct contradiction of God's law and a mockery of the covenant community they were trying to restore. His anger was a reflection of God's own anger towards oppression and injustice. However, Nehemiah did not act rashly on his anger. He is a model of controlled passion. The text says that he pondered them in my mind, or, as some versions put it, he took counsel with myself. He did not immediately lash out at the accused. Instead, he took time to think, to consider the situation carefully, to get his facts straight, and to formulate a plan of action. His anger fueled his determination to act, but his wisdom guided how he would act. He knew that an impulsive outburst could make the situation worse, creating more division. He needed to confront the problem in a way that would bring about genuine repentance and lasting change, not just vent his own fury. After careful consideration, he was ready to act. He identified the culprits, the nobles and the officials. These were the leaders, the wealthy, powerful members of the community who should have been setting an example of godliness and compassion. Instead, they were the ones perpetrating the injustice. Nehemiah went to them and rebuked them directly. He did not mince words. "You are charging your own people interest," he declared. He accused them of usury, of breaking the very law of God that was meant to protect the vulnerable within their community. He brought the sin out into the open, calling it exactly what it was. This initial confrontation was a bold and courageous move. Nehemiah was the governor, but these nobles and officials were influential men. By confronting them, he was risking his own position and creating powerful enemies within his own camp. Yet, his commitment to justice and his concern for the poor outweighed any consideration for his personal comfort or political security. His anger was not a selfish emotion. It was a righteous fire on behalf of the voiceless and oppressed. He knew that the physical wall of Jerusalem would be meaningless if the community living within it was morally and spiritually rotten. The integrity of the people was more important than the integrity of the stonework. Section 3. The Public Assembly. Confronting Injustice. The private rebuke of the nobles and officials was only the first step. Nehemiah knew that a problem this widespread required a public solution. So, he called a great assembly to deal with the matter. He brought the issue before the entire community, putting the actions of the wealthy lenders on display for all to see. This was a powerful strategy. It prevented the nobles from dismissing his concerns behind closed doors. By making the matter public, he created social pressure and held the powerful accountable to the entire community. It was a summons for the whole nation to examine its conscience. In front of everyone, Nehemiah laid out his case with compelling moral force. He began by reminding them of their shared purpose. As far as we were able, we have bought back our Jewish kindred who had been sold to the Gentiles. He reminded them of the great effort and expense to redeem their people from foreign slavery. Then he delivered the devastating rhetorical blow. Now you are selling your own people, only for them to be sold back to us. He exposed the absurd and tragic hypocrisy of their actions. Some were working to free their kinsfolk, others were working to enslave them. The effect of this public shaming was profound. The text notes that the accused kept quiet because they could find nothing to say. So clear, so true, so morally unassailable that they were silenced. Their guilt was laid bare before their neighbors, their friends, the very people they had been exploiting. There was no defense for their actions. They had been caught in a flagrant violation of both the spirit and the letter of God's law, and in the bright light of public scrutiny, they could not offer a single word of justification. Their silence was a confession of their guilt. Nehemiah pressed his advantage, driving the point home. "What you are doing is not right," he declared. He then connected their sinful behavior to the honor of God among the surrounding nations. "Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies?" He reminded them that their actions had consequences beyond their own community. Their infighting and injustice gave their enemies, like Sanballat and Tobiah, legitimate reasons to mock them and their God. How could they claim to be God's people when they treated each other so cruelly? The restoration project was not just about stone and mortar, it was about demonstrating the righteousness of God to a watching world. Section 4. A call to repentance, the restoration of justice. Having exposed the sin and silenced the offenders, Nehemiah moved from confrontation to a clear call for repentance and restitution. He did not leave them in their shame, but provided a specific, actionable path forward. He included himself in the correction, saying, "I, my brothers and my men, are also lending the people money and grain." He then made a decisive command, "But let us stop charging interest." By using the word us, he identified with them, softening the rebuke and inviting them to join him in doing the right thing. He was not just a judge pointing a finger. He was a leader calling his team to a higher standard, starting with himself. The command was explicit and immediate. Give back to them immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses. This was not a request for a gradual change or a future policy adjustment. It was a demand for instant radical restitution. The injustice had to be undone, and it had to be undone now. He also demanded that they return the interest they had charged, the 100th part, 1% per month, a significant rate when compounded. He was calling for a complete reversal of their exploitative practices, requiring them to return the collateral they had seized and the profit they had made. The response from the nobles and officials was immediate and complete. Overwhelmed by the public pressure and the moral weight of Nehemiah's argument, they agreed. "We will give it back," they promised, "and we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say." It was a moment of incredible breakthrough. The leaders, who had been preying on the poor, publicly committed to reversing their actions and adhering to God's law. The unity of the community, which had been so close to shattering, was being restored through this powerful act of corporate repentance and justice. Nehemiah, however, was wise enough to know that a promise made under pressure might not be a promise kept. He immediately cemented their commitment by making it a sworn, public oath. He summoned the priests, made the nobles, and made the officials take an oath in their presence to do what they had promised. He then performed a dramatic, symbolic act. He shook out the folds of his robe and declared, "In this same way, may God shake out of their house and possessions anyone who does not keep this promise. So may such a person be shaken out and emptied." The entire assembly responded with a resounding Amen and praised the Lord. And the text confirms the people did as they had promised. Justice was restored. To reinforce the lesson on justice and selfless leadership, Nehemiah shares a remarkable testimony about his own conduct during his 12 years as governor. He contrasts his behavior with that of the previous governors of Judah. He points out that from the 20th year to the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, a full 12 years, neither he nor his brothers had eaten the food allowance that was due to the governor. This was a substantial and legitimate perk of his office, a tax levied on the people to support the governor and his staff. Yet Nehemiah had voluntarily refused to take it. He explains why. The former governors, he notes, had placed a heavy burden on the people, demanding food, wine, and 40 shekels of silver. Even their assistants had lorded it over the people. Nehemiah saw this as an oppressive practice, an abuse of power that exploited the very people the leaders were meant to serve. Out of his reverence for God, he chose a different path. He refused to add to the people's burdens, especially during a time of such hardship. His leadership was defined not by what he was entitled to take, but by what he was willing to give up for the sake of his people and the honor of God. Instead of acquiring land and wealth for himself, as many in his position would have done, Nehemiah devoted himself to the work on the wall. He states that he did not acquire any land and that all his men were gathered there for the work. This is a stunning statement. In a world where power was almost always used for personal enrichment, Nehemiah used his power for public service. He poured his energy and resources into the community project rather than into building his own personal estate. He was living out the very principles of selfless service that he was demanding from the other leaders. Furthermore, he demonstrated extraordinary generosity in his own household. He regularly fed 150 Jewish officials at his table, in addition to visitors from the surrounding nations. He details the immense daily cost of this hospitality: 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, some poultry, and a generous supply of wine every 10 days. Yet, he concludes, I never demanded the food allowance for the governor, because the demands on these people were heavy. His chapter concludes with a simple, humble prayer. Remember me with favor, my God, for all I have done for these people. His example was his most powerful sermon, a living demonstration of justice, compassion, and true leadership. With the internal crisis of injustice resolved and the work on the wall nearing its end, the focus shifts back to the external enemies. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of their foes received word that Nehemiah had rebuilt the wall, and that not a single gap remained, although the doors had not yet been set in the gates. The project was on the brink of completion. Their earlier tactics of mockery and threats of violence had failed. The wall stood as a testament to the people's resilience and God's faithfulness. Faced with this reality, the enemies changed their strategy once again, resorting to a more subtle and personal attack aimed directly at Nehemiah. Sanballat and Geshem sent a message. "Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono." On the surface, this sounded like an invitation to a diplomatic summit, a peace conference to discuss the new political reality of the region now that Jerusalem was fortified. The plain of Ono was located in neutral territory, about 25 miles northwest of Jerusalem. It was an invitation to leave the security of the city and engage in dialogue with his chief adversaries. Nehemiah, however, possessed a keen spiritual discernment. He immediately saw through their polite invitation to their true sinister motive. He states plainly, "But they were scheming to harm me." He understood that their intention was not to talk, but to trap. Luring him away from the safety of Jerusalem and the protection of his people would make him vulnerable. On the plain of Ono, far from his supporters, he could be easily ambushed, assassinated, or kidnapped. Their goal was to remove the leader, believing that if the head was cut off, the body, the entire rebuilding project, would collapse into chaos and failure. Nehemiah's response was decisive and brilliant. He did not ignore them, nor did he accuse them directly of their plot in his reply. Instead, he sent back a simple, powerful message that has become a classic statement of focused leadership. "I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you?" He refused to be distracted. He defined his work on the wall as a great project, affirming its divine importance. He correctly framed their invitation as a distraction that would halt this crucial work. His refusal was not based on fear for his own safety, but on his unwavering commitment to completing the mission God had given him. Nehemiah's firm refusal to be drawn away from his work did not deter his enemies. They were persistent. 4 times they sent him the same invitation to meet on the plain of Ono, and 4 times Nehemiah gave them the same resolute answer. His consistency showed that he could not be worn down or lured into their trap. Frustrated by his refusal to engage, Sanballat escalated his psychological warfare, moving from a secret plot to a public and malicious slander. He sent his aid to Nehemiah a 5th time. But this time, the message was delivered in a completely different way, calculated to cause maximum damage. This 5th message came in the form of an open letter. In ancient times, official letters were rolled up, sealed, and delivered privately to the recipient. An open letter was a public document, meant to be read by everyone who handled it on its way to its destination. It was essentially an ancient form of a press release or a viral social media post. Sanballat's intention was clear. He wanted the contents of this letter to be spread far and wide, to be read by the people of Jerusalem and the officials of surrounding provinces. He was no longer trying to trap Nehemiah in private, he was trying to ruin his reputation in public. The letter contained a series of inflammatory and completely false accusations. Sanballat claimed that there was a widespread report among the nations, with Geshem as his supposed source, that Nehemiah and the Jews were plotting to rebel against the king of Persia. He twisted the purpose of the wall, claiming it was being built in preparation for this rebellion, with Nehemiah intending to make himself their king. The letter went even further, accusing Nehemiah of appointing prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem, "There is a king in Judah." This was a charge of high treason, the most serious crime one could commit against the Persian Empire. Sanballat's letter concluded with a veiled threat. He warned Nehemiah that this report would inevitably get back to King Artaxerxes, and then he repeated his invitation. So come, let us confer together. The invitation was no longer a request, but a threat. He was using the fear of the king's wrath to try and blackmail Nehemiah into meeting with him. Nehemiah's response was again swift and direct. He sent back a message denying everything. Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. He then turned to God in a short, powerful prayer. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. He refused the lie and asked God for the strength to keep going. Having failed with deception and slander, Nehemiah's enemies devised one final, insidious plot. This was the most dangerous of all because it came from within Jerusalem and was cloaked in the language of divine prophecy. Nehemiah went to visit a man named Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, who was shut in at his home. Shemaiah, presumably a prophet or a man with religious standing, presented Nehemiah with what he framed as a prophetic warning. Let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, and let us close the doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. This was a cunningly crafted trap. The advice seemed spiritual and wise. Shemaiah was suggesting they seek refuge in the holiest place, the temple itself, to escape a supposed assassination plot. The warning was specific and urgent. Assassins were coming that very night. For a man under constant threat, this message would have been deeply alarming, and the proposed solution might have seemed like the only sensible option. The enemy was now using the fear of death, wrapped in a fake prophecy, to try and manipulate Nehemiah into a fatal mistake. They had hired Shemaiah to intimidate him. Nehemiah's response reveals his incredible character and his deep understanding of God's law. He immediately saw the flaws in the proposal. He asked two critical questions. Should a man like me run away? As the governor and leader of the people, for him to flee and hide in fear would be an act of cowardice that would demoralize everyone. It would shatter the image of strength and faith he had worked so hard to project. Or should one like me go into the temple to save his life? Nehemiah, being a layman and not a priest, knew that it was a sin for him to enter the holy sanctuary of the temple. To do so, even to save his own life, would be a profound act of disobedience against God. He refused to go, declaring, "I will not go." In that moment of refusal, he discerned the true nature of the plot. He realized that Shemaiah had not been sent by God. He had been hired by Tobiah and Sanballat. The entire scheme was designed to make him sin. If he had fearfully and unlawfully hidden in the temple, his enemies would have had a legitimate reason to accuse him. They could discredit him as a coward and a sinner, a man who violated God's own house. His moral authority would be destroyed, and his name would be ruined. Once again, Nehemiah saw through the deception, held fast to God's law, and stood his ground, exposing the treachery of false prophets within his own community. After overcoming internal injustice, external threats, deceptive invitations, public slander, and treacherous plots, the work finally reached its glorious conclusion. In the face of every obstacle, the people had persevered. Under Nehemiah's unwavering leadership, the text records the triumphant moment with simple, factual power. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. This short time frame is utterly astounding. To rebuild the entire defensive wall in less than 2 months was a miraculous achievement, a testament to the people's wholehearted work and the favor of God. The completion had a profound impact on the Jews and on their surrounding enemies. When Sanballat, Tobiah, and all the others heard and saw the finished wall, they reacted dramatically. They were much disheartened. They lost their self-confidence. The wall stood as an undeniable symbol of Jewish strength, unity, and divine blessing. Their mockery, their conspiracies, their lies had come to nothing. Their pride was crushed. They were filled with a sense of awe and fear. Most importantly, The enemies understood the true source of this incredible achievement. They realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. They could not attribute this feat to human effort alone. The speed, the success against all odds, and the unwavering resolve of the builders pointed to a power far greater than Nehemiah and his people. God received the glory, even from the mouths of his enemies. The wall was not just a military defense, it was a testimony to the nations, a declaration that the God of Israel was alive, powerful, and actively working on behalf of his people. Even with this great victory, however, the chapter ends on a sober note, reminding us that opposition rarely disappears completely. Nehemiah records that even during this time, the nobles of Judah were secretly corresponding with Tobiah, sending him letters and swearing their allegiance to him, because he was related by marriage to prominent Jewish families. This reveals that the battle for the heart and loyalty of the people was ongoing. Tobiah's influence remained a threat, a fifth column within the newly secured city. Yet, for this moment, the great project was complete. The wall stood strong, a visible sign of a promise kept, a community restored, and a victory won, not by human might, but by the gracious hand of God. With the wall finally completed and the gates securely hung, the physical labor that had dominated the past 52 days was over. The city of Jerusalem was now a fortress, its perimeter restored and its people protected from the immediate threat of external attack. This monumental achievement, however, marked not an end, but a new beginning. A wall is only as strong as the people who guard it. A city is more than just its stones and mortar. It is the community that dwells within. Nehemiah immediately turned his attention from construction to organization, from building the wall to securing the life of the city it was meant to protect. The focus shifted from the external structure to the internal order. His first act was to establish a secure and reliable leadership structure. He appointed his brother Hanani to be in charge of Jerusalem. This was deeply personal and symbolic, bringing the story full circle. The man who carried the burden of the bad news was now entrusted with the responsibility of the good news. Alongside Hanani, he appointed Hananiah as commander of the citadel. Hananiah was a man of great integrity and one who feared God more than most people do. Nehemiah's criteria for leadership were not political skill or military prowess alone, but proven character and deep, genuine reverence for God. He then issued specific instructions for the daily security of the city. He commanded that the gates were not to be opened until the sun was hot, and that they were to be shut and barred while the guards were still on duty. This was counterintuitive. Gates were typically opened at dawn for travel and commerce. Nehemiah's order created a shorter, more defensible window of time, reducing the risk of a surprise attack in the dim light of early morning. Vigilance must not relax even after victory. The completion of the wall was a time to be more watchful than ever. Finally, he organized the citizens into a city-wide watch. He appointed guards from among the people, some to stand at designated guard posts and others to stand watch near their own homes. Every person had a personal stake in the security of the community. By guarding their own neighborhoods, the watch would be carried out with utmost diligence and personal commitment. The city was now secure, not just because of high walls and barred gates, but because its people were organized, well-led, and personally invested in its peace and safety. Section 2. The sacred task of taking a census. With the city's security established, Nehemiah describes a pivotal moment of divine inspiration. He writes, "So my God put it into my heart to assemble the people." This was not simply an administrative idea or a logical next step. Nehemiah recognized this impulse as a directive from God himself. The task was to gather everyone, the nobles, the officials, the common people, for the purpose of registering them by families. This act of taking a census was more than just a head count. It was a sacred task, a way of officially reconstituting the people of God in their ancestral land. It was about knowing who was there, who belonged to the covenant community, who was committed to the future of Jerusalem. The city, though now secure, faced a new problem. It was large and spacious, but there were very few people living inside its walls, and the houses had not yet been rebuilt. The magnificent new wall encircled a largely empty space. A city without inhabitants is just a museum, a hollow monument to the past. For Jerusalem to be the vibrant, thriving capital it was meant to be, it needed people. The census was the first step toward addressing this issue. By understanding the demographic makeup of the entire returned community in the province of Judah, Nehemiah could begin to formulate a plan to repopulate the capital city, the heart of the nation's spiritual and civil life. The census was also an act of defining the community. In the ancient world, genealogies were of supreme importance. They established a person's identity, their tribal and family lineage, their right to inheritance and land. For the returned exiles, this was even more critical. Their register was proof of their connection to the people whom God had originally called out of Egypt and settled in that very land. It was a way of saying, we are the true heirs of the promises. We belong here. In a community that had been scattered and intermingled with foreign peoples for decades, re-establishing these genealogical lines was essential for restoring order, clarifying identity, and ensuring the purity of the covenant people. This divinely prompted task of registration was therefore foundational to the next phase of renewal. The first 6 chapters were about restoring the city's physical body through the wall. Chapter 7 marks the beginning of the process of restoring its soul, its people. Before God could re-establish his covenant and law among them in the subsequent chapters, the community first needed to be identified and organized. The census was the bridge between the physical restoration of the wall and the spiritual reformation that was to come. It was a meticulous, administrative task, but one that was initiated by God and was, pregnant with theological significance for the future of Israel. Section 3. A link to the past. The register of the first return. As Nehemiah began the task of organizing the census, he made a remarkable discovery. He found the genealogical record of the very first group of exiles who had returned from Babylon. This was not a new document he created, but a historical treasure he unearthed. This register dated back nearly a century earlier, to the time of Zerubbabel, who led the first wave of returnees under the decree of King Cyrus of Persia. Finding this document was like discovering the original charter of the community, a direct and tangible link to the very beginning of the Restoration era. It provided the perfect foundation and legal precedent for the census Nehemiah was about to undertake. The discovery was profoundly significant. It affirmed that Nehemiah's work was not a new, standalone project, but the continuation and culmination of a long process of restoration that God had begun decades earlier. It connected his generation with the faith and courage of their ancestors, who had made that first brave journey back from captivity. By reading and reaffirming this old list, Nehemiah was honoring the past and rooting his present work in the long, unfolding story of God's faithfulness to his people. It reminded everyone that they were part of a multi-generational project of return and rebuilding, a story that stretched back to the promises of prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah. The list begins by naming the leaders who came with Zerubbabel, men like Jeshua, Ezra, Mordecai. These were the pioneering figures who had laid the groundwork for everything Nehemiah was now accomplishing. The register served as a memorial, ensuring that the foundational contributions of these first returnees would not be forgotten. It was a roll call of heroes, a testament to those who had faith to leave the relative stability of Babylon, for the uncertainty and hardship of a ruined homeland. By incorporating this historic list into his own record, Nehemiah was weaving the past and present together into a single, continuous narrative of God's redemptive work. This act of looking back before moving forward is a powerful lesson. Nehemiah understood that to build a strong future, the community needed to be firmly connected to its past. The register of the first return provided that connection. It was an anchor, a source of identity, and a confirmation of their legitimacy as the people of God in the land of promise. It established a baseline of who belonged, providing a clear and authoritative standard against which the current generation could be registered. The old list became the blueprint for the new community, ensuring continuity and order as they embarked on the next chapter of their life together. Section 4. The Long List, Honoring the Families of the Faithful. The Book of Nehemiah. Chapter 7 is taken up by the reading of this ancient register. It might seem dry at first, a repetitive list of names and numbers, but its inclusion is deliberate and meaningful. The list meticulously records the families who returned, naming the ancestral head of each clan and the number of members. Parosh, Shephatiah, Ara, followed by their numbers. Each name is a family that chose faith over comfort. A group of people who answered the call to return and rebuild. A monument in words, honoring the ordinary families who formed the backbone of the restored community. The register details the organized and diverse groups who returned. It lists not only prominent families, but men from towns like Bethlehem, Netopha, Anathoth, priests, Levites, musicians, gatekeepers. From the start, the goal was to restore not just population, but full religious life. Temple personnel were present even before the temple was fully functional, showing deep commitment to worship. A poignant detail. Some could not prove their lineage. Several families could not show descent from Israel. Some priestly families lacked genealogical records and were excluded as unclean. They could not eat the most sacred food, until a priest could consult God through the Urim and Thummim. This shows the importance placed on authentic identity within the covenant community. It preserved the integrity of the priesthood and the people. Belonging required verifiable connection to Israel's heritage. This long, detailed list is anything but boring. It speaks of identity, faithfulness, and the value of every person in God's plan. It honors the courage of the first returnees and sets a standard of belonging for Nehemiah's generation. God's great work is carried out by ordinary people who make faithful choices, a community frozen in time, choosing to believe and journey home. Nehemiah affirms that every family and individual who contributed was seen, counted, and remembered. Section 5. A community's generosity, giving to God's work. After accounting for the people, the register concludes by accounting for their wealth and their generous contributions to the work of God. The list details the total number of the whole assembly, 42,360 people. Male servants, female servants, and professional musicians. It also catalogues their collective wealth in the form of livestock, hundreds of horses, mules, camels, and thousands of donkeys. This inventory gives a sense of the scale and economic substance of the community that had returned from exile. They were not merely a handful of refugees, but a significant and resourceful population ready to re-establish a nation. The narrative then highlights a powerful act of collective generosity. The text records that some of the heads of the families contributed to the work. This is a recurring theme in the story of restoration. The work of God is funded by the people of God. The leaders set the example, giving willingly and generously from their own resources, supporting the temple treasury and the establishment of the priesthood. This giving was not a tax or a compulsory levy. It was a voluntary offering, an expression of their gratitude and their commitment to the restored life of the community. Their treasure followed their hearts, which were set on seeing God's house and city thrive. The specific contributions are listed, showing the scale of their commitment. The governor, Nehemiah himself, led the way by giving 1,000 drachmas of gold, 50 ceremonial bowls, and over 500 priestly garments to the treasury. His leadership was not just about directing and defending, it was also about sacrificial giving. Following his example, other heads of families gave tens of thousands of drachmas of gold and thousands of minas of silver. Even the rest of the people contributed significantly, giving a vast amount of gold, silver, and dozens of priestly garments. This widespread generosity, from the governor down to the common people, demonstrates a unified and wholehearted dedication to God's work. This act of giving is the financial counterpart to the physical labor on the wall. Their time, their energy, their safety to the project. Now they gave their wealth. This ensured that the spiritual life of the community, centered on the temple and its priesthood, would be properly supplied and sustained for the future. Temple, priesthood. The restoration was not complete until the structures for worship were not only rebuilt, but also resourced. Rebuilt, resourced. This outpouring of generosity was a powerful act of worship in itself, a tangible demonstration of the people's love for God and their hope for the future He was building among them. Section 6. Settling the land, a people in place for a new beginning. The conclusion of the chapter is one of peaceful settlement, completed the wall, established security, registered the people. The narrative ends with a simple but profound statement. The priests settled in their own towns. The Levites settled in their own towns. The gatekeepers settled in their own towns. The musicians settled in their own towns. The temple servants settled in their own towns. Certain of the people settled in their own towns. The rest of the Israelites settled in their own towns. After the intense drama of the previous chapters, the opposition, the conspiracies, the internal strife, the frantic pace of building. This verse brings a sense of calm and order. The people are finally home, settled in their ancestral lands. This settling is the culmination of what has come before. The journey from exile, the initial return under Zerubbabel, the rebuilding of the temple, the rebuilding of the wall under Nehemiah, all of it for one purpose: for God's people to dwell securely in the land He promised. The list in chapter 7 defined who the people were. This final verse shows them taking their rightful place, a nation re-established, a community organized, families returning to ancestral towns. Ruin and exile give way to peace, settlement, belonging. The final phrase sets the stage for what is to come. When the 7th month came, the Israelites were in their towns. The 7th month, Tishri, was the most sacred month. Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles. The timing creates a sense of anticipation. The physical and administrative work is done. The people are in place. Now the stage is set for spiritual renewal led by Ezra. A peaceful, hopeful conclusion to our walk through chapters 1 to 7. We have journeyed with Nehemiah from heartbreak in Susa to triumphant settlement. A man of prayer and action led a community to achieve the impossible. A wall has been built. A people have been guarded. Their identity has been reaffirmed. They are now in place, ready for the next chapter with God. Chapter 7's conclusion is a quiet pause, a deep breath. May the faithfulness and perseverance we witnessed inspire us in our own journey of faith. We are gathered here today to continue a sacred journey through the words of the Old Testament. This is a time set apart for you, a moment to breathe deeply, connect with the timeless stories of faith. We are continuing our reading of the Book of Nehemiah, picking up the story at a pivotal moment of renewal, rediscovery. In this session, we will walk through chapters 8 through 13, listening to the words as they were meant to be heard, with an open heart and a quiet mind. A story of a community coming back together, rebuilding not just walls, but their very spirit. Our time together is gentle and unhurried. The reading will be slow, allowing each word and every verse to settle within you. This is not a race to the end, but a slow pilgrimage through Scripture. The voice you will hear is a calm and steady companion, speaking with a softness that invites peace into your day. We encourage you to use this time for your own spiritual practice. Quiet meditation, a peaceful walk in nature, or simply sitting in stillness, allowing the words to wash over you, bringing comfort and clarity. The chapters we explore are filled with themes of worship, repentance, and recommitment to God. We will witness the people of Jerusalem gather to hear the law read aloud, their hearts stirred with emotion, a deep desire to follow God's ways. We will listen to their heartfelt prayers of confession and their solemn promises to live in faithfulness. This part of Nehemiah's story is a profound reminder that true restoration is a matter of the heart, a turning back toward the divine source of all strength and hope. As we prepare to begin, find a comfortable position. Let go of distractions outside. Release tension in your body and allow your mind to become still. This is your personal sanctuary, a moment carved out for you and for God. Let the silence between the words be as meaningful as the words themselves. Prepare your heart to receive the story of a people rediscovering their faith, and perhaps you will find echoes of your own spiritual path, your own moments of renewal. In this reading, we will journey through chapters 8, chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13 of the Book of Nehemiah. Each chapter will be introduced simply, followed by a complete reading of its verses. The language used is clear and modern, chosen to make the ancient text accessible and easy to understand, allowing the core message to shine through without distraction. We believe that Scripture should speak directly to the heart, and our aim is to present it in a way that feels both reverent and deeply personal, like a quiet conversation between you and the divine. This audio experience has been intentionally crafted to be simple and pure. There will be no background music, no sound effects, no changing visuals. The screen will remain dark, creating a space free from external stimulation. This minimalism is a deliberate choice, designed to help you focus entirely on the spoken word. It is an invitation to close your eyes, let your imagination be your guide, and let your spirit be your guide. Let the story unfold in your mind's eye, and allow the peaceful rhythm of the narration to calm your soul and center your thoughts. Between each chapter, there will be a brief, gentle pause. This moment of silence is a gift, an opportunity for you to reflect on what you have just heard. You can use this time to let a particular verse or idea resonate more deeply within you. It is a space to breathe, pray, and be present in the stillness. These pauses are like rests in a piece of music. They are essential to the overall harmony of the experience, giving you the space needed to truly absorb the profound messages of community, covenant, and spiritual cleansing. As we step into this sacred narrative, let us remember the purpose of our gathering. We are here to listen, learn, and be transformed. The story of Nehemiah and his people is not just a historical account. It is a living testament to the power of faith and the enduring grace of God. It speaks of the joy found in collective worship, the strength discovered in shared commitment, and the peace that comes from aligning our lives with a divine purpose. Let us now begin our reading, and may it be a blessing to you. Chapter 8. All the people of Israel were now settled in their towns. On the first day of the 7th month, they all gathered together as one in the public square in front of the water gate. They asked Ezra the scribe to bring out the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded for Israel. So on that day, Ezra the priest brought the law before the assembly, which included men, women, and all the children who were old enough to understand. He read from it aloud, facing the square in front of the water gate, from early morning until midday. He read to the men, the women, and those who could understand. And all the people listened attentively to the book of the law. Ezra the scribe stood on a high wooden platform that had been built for the occasion. To his right stood Mattithiah, Shema, Ananiah, Uriah, Hilkiah, and Maaseiah. To his left stood Pedaiah, Mishael, Malchijah, Hashum, Hashbaddanah, Zechariah, and Meshullam. Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was standing above them. And as he opened it, all the people stood up. Then Ezra praised the Lord, the great God, and all the people lifted their hands and responded, Amen, Amen. Then they bowed down and worshipped the Lord with their faces to the ground. The Levites, Jeshua, Bani, Sherebiah, Jamin, Akub, Shabbathai, Hodiah, Maaseiah, Kelita, Azariah, Jozabad, Hanan, and Pelaiah, instructed the people in the law while the people were standing there. They read from the book of the law of God, making it clear and giving the meaning so that the people could understand what was being read. Then Nehemiah the governor, Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who were instructing the people said to them all, This day is sacred to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep. For all the people had been weeping as they listened to the words of the law. Nehemiah said, Go and enjoy choice food and sweet drinks, and send some to those who have nothing prepared. This day is sacred to our Lord. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. The Levites calmed all the people, saying, Be still, for this is a sacred day. Do not be sad. Then all the people went away to eat and drink, to send portions of food, and to celebrate with great joy, because they now understood the words that had been made known to them. On the 2nd day of the month, the heads of all the families, along with the priests and the Levites, gathered around Ezra the scribe to study the words of the law. They found written in the law, which the Lord had commanded through Moses, that the Israelites were to live in temporary shelters during the festival of the 7th month, and that they should proclaim this word and spread it throughout their towns and in Jerusalem. Go out into the hill country and bring back branches from olive and wild olive trees, and from myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees, to make temporary shelters, as it is written. So the people went out and brought back branches, and built themselves temporary shelters on their own roofs, in their courtyards, in the courts of the house of God, and in the square by the water gate, and the one by the gate of Ephraim. The whole assembly that had returned from exile built shelters and lived in them. From the days of Joshua son of Nun until that day, the Israelites had not celebrated it like this, and their joy was very great. Day after day, from the first day to the last, Ezra read from the book of the law of God. They celebrated the festival for 7 days, and on the 8th day, in accordance with the regulation, there was an assembly. Chapter 9. On the 24th day of the same month, the Israelites gathered together, fasting and wearing sackcloth and putting dust on their heads. Those of Israelite descent had separated themselves from all foreigners. They stood in their places and confessed their sins and the wickedness of their ancestors. They stood where they were and read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a quarter of the day, and spent another quarter in confession and in worshipping the Lord their God. Standing on the stairs of the Levites were Jeshua, Bani, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Buni, Sherebiah, Bani, and Kanani. They cried out with loud voices to the Lord their God. And the Levites, Jeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabniah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, and Pethahiah, said, "Stand up and praise the Lord your God, who is from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, and may it be exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all their starry host, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you. You are the Lord God, who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans and named him Abraham. You found his heart faithful to you, and you made a covenant with him to give to his descendants the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and Girgashites. You have kept your promise because you are righteous. You saw the suffering of our ancestors in Egypt. You heard their cry at the Red Sea. You sent signs and wonders against Pharaoh, against all his officials and all the people of his land, for you knew how arrogantly they treated them. You made a name for yourself, which remains to this day. You divided the sea before them, so that they passed through it on dry ground, but you hurled their pursuers into the depths, like a stone into mighty waters. By day you led them with a pillar of cloud, and by night with a pillar of fire to give them light on the way they were to take. You came down on Mount Sinai, you spoke to them from heaven, you gave them regulations that are just and laws that are true, and decrees and commands that are good. You made known to them your holy Sabbath, and gave them commands, decrees, and laws through your servant Moses. In their hunger you gave them bread from heaven, and in their thirst you brought them water from the rock. You told them to go in and take possession of the land you had sworn with uplifted hand to give them. But they, our ancestors, became arrogant and stiff-necked, and they did not obey your commands. They refused to listen and failed to remember the miracles you performed among them. They became stiff-necked and in their rebellion appointed a leader in order to return to their slavery. But you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. Therefore you did not desert them. Even when they cast for themselves an image of a calf and said, "This is your God, who brought you up out of Egypt," or when they committed awful blasphemies. Because of your great compassion, you did not abandon them in the wilderness. By day the pillar of cloud did not fail to guide them on their path, nor the pillar of fire by night to shine on the way they were to take. You gave your good spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths, and you gave them water for their thirst. For 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness. They lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, nor did their feet become swollen. You gave them kingdoms and nations, allotting to them even the remotest frontiers. Their children multiplied. They took possession of a land with fertile fields and spacious cities. They ate to the full and were well nourished. They revelled in your great goodness. But they were disobedient and rebelled against you. They turned their backs on your law. They killed your prophets who had warned them in order to turn them back to you. They committed awful blasphemies. So you delivered them into the hands of their enemies, who oppressed them. But when they were oppressed, they cried out to you. From heaven you heard them, and in your great compassion you gave them deliverers who rescued them from the hand of their enemies. But as soon as they had rest, they did evil again in your sight. Then you abandoned them to the hand of their enemies so that they ruled over them. And when they cried out to you again, you heard from heaven, and in your compassion you delivered them time after time. You warned them in order to turn them back to your law, but they became arrogant and disobeyed your commands. For many years you were patient with them, yet they paid no attention, so you delivered them into the hands of the neighboring peoples. But in your great mercy you did not put an end to them or abandon them, for you are a gracious and merciful God. Now therefore, our God, the great God, mighty and awesome, who keeps his covenant of love, Do not let all this hardship seem trifling in your eyes, the hardship that has come on us. In all that has happened to us, you have remained righteous. You have acted faithfully while we acted wickedly. Our kings, our leaders, our priests, and our ancestors did not follow your law. They did not pay attention to your commands or the warnings you gave them. But see, we are slaves today, slaves in the land you gave our ancestors so they could eat its fruit and the other good things it produces. Because of our sins, its abundant harvest goes to the kings you have placed over us. They rule over our bodies and our cattle as they please. We are in great distress. In view of all this, we are making a binding agreement, putting it in writing, and our leaders, our Levites, and our priests are affixing their seals to it. Chapter 10. Those who sealed it were Nehemiah the governor, the son of Hakaliah, Zedekiah, Sariah, Azariah, Jeremiah, Pashur, Amariah, Malchijah, Hattush, Shebaniah, Malach, Harim, Meremoth, Obadiah, Daniel, Ginnethon, Baruch, Meshullam, Abijah, Mijamin, Maaziah, Bilgai, and Shemaiah. These were the priests, the Levites, Jeshua son of Azaniah, Binnui of the sons of Henadad, Kadmiel, and their associates, Shebaniah, Hodiah, Kelita, Peliah, Hanan, Micah, Rehob, Hashabiah, Zachar, Sherebiah, Shebaniah, Hodiah, Bani, and Beninu. The leaders of the people, Parosh, Pahath Moab, Elam, Zatu, Bani, Bunni, Asgad, Bebai, Adonijah, Bigvai, Adin, Ater, Hezekiah, Azur, Hodiah, Hashum, Bezai, Harif, Anathoth, Nebai, Magpiash, Meshullam, Hezir, Meshezabel, Zadok, Jadua, Pelatiah, Hanan, Anaiah, Hoshea, Hananiah, Hashub, Halohesh, Pilha, Shobek, Rehum, Hashabnah, Maaseiah, Ahia, Hanan, Anan, Maluk, Harim, and Bana. The rest of the people, priests, Levites, gatekeepers, musicians, temple servants, and all who separated themselves from the neighboring peoples for the sake of the law of God, together with their wives and all their sons and daughters who are able to understand. All these now join their fellow Israelites, the nobles, and bind themselves with a curse and an oath to follow the law of God given through Moses, the servant of God, and to obey carefully all the commands, regulations, and decrees of the Lord our Lord. We promise not to give our daughters in marriage to the peoples around us, or take their daughters for our sons. When the neighboring peoples bring merchandise or grain to sell on the Sabbath, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or on any holy day. Every 7th year, we will forego working the land and will cancel all debts. We assume the responsibility for carrying out the commands to give 1/3 of a shekel each year for the service of the house of our God. For the showbread, for the regular grain offerings and burnt offerings, for the offerings on the Sabbaths, at the new moon festivals and at the appointed festivals, for the holy offerings, for sin offerings to make atonement for Israel, and for all the duties of the house of our God. We, the priests, the Levites, and the people, have cast lots to determine when each of our families is to bring a contribution of wood to the house of our God at designated times each year to burn on the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law. We also assume responsibility for bringing to the house of the Lord each year the first fruits of our crops and of every fruit tree. As it is also written in the law, we will bring the firstborn of our sons and of our cattle, of our herds and of our flocks to the house of our God, to the priests ministering there. Moreover, we will bring to the storerooms of the house of our God, to the priests, the first of our ground meal, of our grain offerings, of the fruit of all our trees, and of our new wine and olive oil. And we will bring a tithe of our crops to the Levites, for it is the Levites who collect the tithes in all the towns where we work. A priest descended from Aaron is to accompany the Levites when they receive the tithes, and the Levites are to bring 1/10 of the tithes up to the house of our God, to the storerooms of the treasury. The people of Israel, including the Levites, are to bring their contributions of grain, new wine, and olive oil to the storerooms, where the articles for the sanctuary are kept, and where the ministering priests, the gatekeepers, and the musicians are. We will not neglect the house of our God. Chapter 11. Now the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots to bring one out of every 10 to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while the remaining 9 were to stay in their own towns. The people commended all who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. These are the provincial leaders who settled in Jerusalem. Now some Israelites, priests, Levites, temple servants, and descendants of Solomon's servants lived in the towns of Judah, each on their own property in the various towns. From the descendants of Judah, Athiah, son of Uzziah, and his associates, 468 able men. Maaseiah, son of Baruch, and his associates, 928 men. Joel, son of Zikri, was their chief officer, and Judah, son of Hassenuah, was second in command over the city. From the descendants of Benjamin, Sallu, son of Meshullam, and his associates, 928 men. From the priests, Jediah, son of Joiarib, Jachin, Sariah, son of Hilkiah, supervisor in the house of God, and their associates who carried on the work at the temple, 822 men. Adiah, son of Jeroham, and his associates who were heads of families, 242 men. Amashsai, son of Azarel, and his associates who were able men, 128. Their chief officer was Zabdiel, son of Haggadolim. From the Levites, Shemaiah, son of Hashub, Shabbathai, and Jozabad, 2 of the heads of the Levites who had charge of the outside work of the house of God, Mattaniah, son of Micah, the director who led in thanksgiving and prayer, Bakbukiah, second among his associates, and Abda, son of Shammua. The Levites in the holy city totaled 284. The gatekeepers, Akub, Talmon, and their associates, who guarded the gates, 172 men. The rest of the Israelites, with the priests and Levites, were in all the towns of Judah, each on their ancestral property. The temple servants lived on the hill of Ophel, and Zihar and Gishpah were in charge of them. The chief officer of the Levites in Jerusalem was Uzzi, son of Bani, one of the descendants of Asaph, who were the musicians responsible for the service of the house of God. The musicians were under the king's orders, which regulated their daily activity. Pethahiah, son of Meshezabel, one of the descendants of Zerah, son of Judah, was the king's agent in all affairs relating to the people. As for the villages with their fields, some of the people of Judah lived in Kiriath Arba and its surrounding settlements, in Dibon and its settlements, in Jacabzeel and its villages, in Jeshua, in Moladah, in Beth Pelet, in Hazar Shual, in Beersheba and its settlements, in Ziklag, in Makona and its settlements, in En-Rimmon, in Zorah, in Jarmuth, Zanoah, Adullam and their villages, in Lachish and its fields, and in Azekah and its settlements. So they were scattered from Beersheba to the valley of Hinnom. The descendants of Benjamin from Geba lived in Michmash, Ijah, Bethel and its settlements, in Anathoth, Nob and Ananiah, in Hadid, Zeboim and Nebalat, in Lod and Ono, and in the valley of craftsmen. Some of the divisions of the Levites of Judah settled in Benjamin. Chapter 12. These were the priests and Levites who returned with Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and with Jeshua, Sariah, Jeremiah, Ezra, Amariah, Malluch, Hattush, Shechaniah, Rehum, Meremoth, Iddo, Ginnethon, Abijah, Mijamin, Madiah, Bilgah, Shemaiah, Joiarib, Jediah, Sallu, Amok, Hilkiah, and Jediah. These were the leaders of the priests and their associates in the days of Jeshua. The Levites were Jeshua, Binnui, Kadmiel, Sherebiah, Judah, and also Mattaniah, who, with his associates, was in charge of the songs of thanksgiving. Bakbakiah and Unni, their associates, stood opposite them in the services. Jeshua was the father of Joachim, Joachim the father of Eliashib, Eliashib the father of Joiada, Joiada the father of Jonathan, and Jonathan the father of Jaddua. In the days of Joachim, these were the heads of the priestly families. The list of 22 family heads is read. The family heads of the Levites in the days of Eliashib, Joiada, Johanan, and Jaddua, as well as the priests, were recorded in the reign of Darius the Persian. At the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, the Levites were sought out from where they lived and were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate joyfully the dedication with songs of thanksgiving and with the music of cymbals, harps, and lyres. The musicians also were brought together from the region around Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophathites, from Beth Gilgal, and from the area of Geba and Asmaveth, for the musicians had built villages for themselves around Jerusalem. When the priests and Levites had purified themselves ceremonially, they also purified the people, the gates and the wall. I had the leaders of Judah go up on top of the wall. I also appointed 2 large choirs to give thanks. One was to proceed on top of the wall to the right, toward the dung gate. Hoshea and half the leaders of Judah followed them, along with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, as well as some priests with trumpets, and also Zechariah, with the musical instruments of David the man of God. Ezra the scribe led the procession. The second choir proceeded in the opposite direction. I followed them on top of the wall with half the people. The 2 choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God. So did I, together with half the officials, as well as the priests, with their trumpets. The choirs sang under the direction of Jezrahiah, and on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. At that time, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, first fruits and tithes. From the fields around the towns, they were to bring into the storerooms the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah was pleased with the ministering priests and Levites. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification, as did also the musicians and gatekeepers, according to the commands of David and his son Solomon. For long ago, in the days of David and Asaph, there had been directors for the musicians and for the songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. So in the days of Zerubbabel and of Nehemiah, all Israel contributed the daily portions for the musicians and the gatekeepers. They also set aside the portion for the other Levites, and the Levites set aside the portion for the descendants of Aaron. Chapter 13. On that day the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people, and there it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God, because they had not met the Israelites with food and water, but had hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. Our God, however, turned the curse into a blessing. When the people heard this law, they excluded from Israel all who were of foreign descent. Before this, Eliashib the priest had been put in charge of the storerooms of the house of our God. He was closely associated with Tobiah, and he had provided him with a large room formerly used to store the grain offerings and incense and temple articles, and also the tithes of grain, new wine and olive oil prescribed for the Levites, musicians and gatekeepers, as well as the contributions for the priests. But while all this was going on, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes king of Babylon I had returned to the king. Some time later I asked his permission and came back to Jerusalem. Here I learned about the evil thing Eliashib had done in providing Tobiah a room in the courts of the house of God. I was very displeased and threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. I gave orders to purify the rooms, and then I put back into them the equipment of the house of God, with the grain offerings and the incense. I also learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them, and that all the Levites and musicians responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. So I rebuked the officials and asked them, "Why is the house of God neglected?" Then I called them together and stationed them at their posts. All Judah brought the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil into the storerooms. I put Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and a Levite named Pedaiah in charge of the storerooms, and made Hanan son of Zakkur, the son of Mattaniah, their assistant, because they were considered trustworthy. They were made responsible for distributing the supplies to their fellow Levites. Remember me for this, my God, and do not blot out what I have so faithfully done for the house of my God and its services. In those days, I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in grain and loading it on donkeys, together with wine, grapes, figs, and all other kinds of loads, and they were bringing all this into Jerusalem on the Sabbath. Therefore I warned them against selling food on that day. People from Tyre who lived in Jerusalem were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise and selling them in Jerusalem on the Sabbath to the people of Judah. I rebuked the nobles of Judah and said to them, "What is this wicked thing you are doing, desecrating the Sabbath day? Didn't your ancestors do the same things, so that our God brought all this disaster on us and on this city? Now you are stirring up more wrath against Israel by desecrating the Sabbath." When evening shadows fell on the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I ordered the doors to be shut and not opened until the Sabbath was over. I stationed some of my own men at the gates, so that no load could be brought in on the Sabbath day. Once or twice the merchants and sellers of all kinds of goods spent the night outside Jerusalem. But I warned them and said, "Why do you spend the night by the wall? If you do this again, I will arrest you." From that time on they no longer came on the Sabbath. Then I commanded the Levites to purify themselves and go and guard the gates in order to keep the Sabbath day holy. Remember me for this also, my God, and show mercy to me according to your great love. Moreover, in those days I saw men of Judah who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or the language of one of the other peoples, and did not know how to speak the language of Judah. I rebuked them and called curses down on them. I beat some of the men and pulled out their hair. I made them take an oath in God's name and said, "You are not to give your daughters in marriage to their sons, nor are you to take their daughters in marriage for your sons or for yourselves." Was it not because of marriages like these that Solomon, king of Israel, sinned? Among the many nations there was no king like him. He was loved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel, but even he was led into sin by foreign women. Must we hear now that you too are doing all this terrible wickedness, and are being unfaithful to our God by marrying foreign women? One of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite, and I drove him away from me. Remember them, my God, because they defiled the priestly office and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. So I purified them from everything foreign and assigned duties to the priests and the Levites, each to his own task. I also made provision for contributions of wood at designated times and for the first fruits. Remember me with favor, my God. Our journey through the later chapters of Nehemiah has come to a gentle close. We have walked alongside the people of Israel, moved from the joyous celebration of a rebuilt wall to the deeper, more challenging work of rebuilding a community of faith. We listened as the words of the law were read aloud, stirring a nation to tears of repentance and to shouts of jubilant praise. We witnessed them seal a covenant, a solemn promise to place God at the center of their lives. Promising to honor the Sabbath, support the temple, maintain their spiritual purity. True restoration is an ongoing process, a cycle of rediscovery, recommitment, and sometimes necessary correction. The joy of the Lord was their strength, yet that strength was tested when Nehemiah departed and old habits crept back in. The neglected temple, the profaned Sabbath, the forbidden marriages he discovered. Our commitment requires constant vigilance and willingness to be corrected, to be called back to the promises we have made as individuals and as a community of faith. Nehemiah's leadership is a stark example of dedication to God's honor. As you go from this time of reflection, we encourage you to carry the peaceful spirit of this reading with you. Continue to meditate on the verses or themes that resonated most deeply with you. Let the story of a community rebuilding its faith be a wellspring of hope, for renewal is always possible. God's mercy is abundant, and joy is the strength He provides for the journey ahead, no matter the challenges you face. May the words you have heard settle deep within your spirit, bringing comfort to your soul and clarity to your path. May you find strength in community, joy in worship, and peace in the quiet moments of reflection. And may you, like Nehemiah, live a life that honors God, secure in the knowledge that He sees your efforts and remembers you with favor. Thank you for joining us on this sacred journey. Be well and walk in peace until we meet again.